In a decisive moment, a racist guard prevents access to a promising star. And at that very second, Beyoncé decides to burst in to deliver justice. This is the beginning of a revolution, where hate confronts solidarity and the promise of imminent change keeps you on the edge of your seat. Get ready to witness how injustice is defeated by the unstoppable power of truth. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. Dawn covered the city with a deceptive radiance, illuminating both its vibrant diversity and the shadows of a persistent prejudice. The city, vibrant in its diversity, held secrets on every corner, and in those recesses something great was foreshadowed, something that would change the course of the day. At the center of this stage was Nia, an emerging star with eyes full of longing and a mixture of nervousness and enthusiasm palpable in every gesture. In front of a mirror, Nia adjusted her outfit. Her reflection gave her back the look of someone ready to make history. The flashes of her personal history intertwined with the promise of a bright future. And in each reflection, one could glimpse the light that would propel her to transcend any obstacle. A few blocks away, in a meeting room that smelled of reheated coffee and repressed tension, amidst forced laughter and jokes loaded with dark irony, Garrison, the guard, established his silent leadership over a small group, where every word hinted that his vision of the world was tainted by old grudges. In an almost imperceptible whisper, while adjusting his tie worn by time, one of his colleagues commented, "In this city, one knows where the good is and where it is not." The sun ascended slowly, casting golden flashes over facades that seemed to hold the secrets of generations. At that moment, the entire city was turning into a stage in which time dissolved between the calm of dawn and the imminent storm. The preparations for the great event mingled with the vibration of an invisible multitude, with the beating of hearts that were already anticipating an unexpected twist. Nia, in her little sanctuary of mirrors and lights, engaged in an inner dialogue filled with determination and fear, while mentally rehearsing every step that would take her to the stage. "I must be strong. Today, my words, my voice, will be my shield and my sword." Her thoughts danced between the excitement of her debut and the latent threat of a world that still had not learned to value what is different. At the same time, Garrison and his colleagues were preparing in silence to fulfill a role that, unbeknownst to them, would become the prelude to a confrontation that would shake the foundations of their convictions. Every movement of his, from the way he adjusted his uniform to the trace of arrogance he left in his wake, was imbued with a dark and dangerous confidence, a harbinger of an impending conflict. The city, a silent witness to every emotion and every whisper, seemed to hold its breath. Every street, every lamppost, every shadow became a participant in the growing tension, as if fate were weaving an invisible net that would bind the stories of Nia and Garrison into a single thread of destiny. Thus the day began, with the vibration of a city at pause, with the hope of a star about to shine, and with the latent tension of a prejudice that was about to confront the force of change. The threshold of tension had been opened, and in every corner, in every sigh, one could feel that something inescapable and transcendent, was about to happen. The sun was descending over the Hollywood Bowl, tinting the sky with amber tones. Nia arrived in an elegant sedan that was gliding smoothly down the avenue. Upon stopping, the warm evening breeze caressed her face as she stepped out of the vehicle with the grace of someone who knows that every step is crucial. With the elegance of a rising star, she made her way to the access line, her heels resonating on the sidewalk like the beat of a symphony yet to come. She looked up, Her night had only just begun. In the distance, the murmur of the crowd grew as people advanced in the queue. Some faces showed the pre-event excitement, others, the impassive routine of those who already knew the way. Among them, the figure of Garrison stood like an immovable sentinel at the threshold. With a rigid posture and a gaze that denoted a security forged in immutable prejudices, Garrison checked the list and allowed entry to those who, in his opinion, fit the expected mold. Garrison let the guests pass with mechanical gestures, exchanging harsh comments with his colleagues. His routine was laden with disdain. Nia advanced with determination. The night had not yet begun for her. But then, upon reaching the entrance, her step halted. In front of her, an obstacle in the form of a man. Upon reaching the main entrance, Nia stopped. She was not the only one in line, but for some reason, she felt that all eyes were fixed on her. The air was heavy. The expectation grew. And then, Garrison saw her. His eyes, hard and calculating, scanned the line and settled on her. With a gesture that mixed routine with a subtle arrogance, he interposed himself in her path. "Miss, could you wait a moment?" Garrison asked, his voice as cold and measured as the metal of the gate that defended the entrance. The collective murmur of those present intensified. Some faces showed astonishment, others a silent disapproval. In the air one could sense an almost palpable tension. Nia, surprised and with her heart racing, straightened up, adjusting her elegant posture. "Why me?" she asked herself silently, feeling a twinge of injustice that raised the hairs on her skin. With a soft but firm voice, she replied, "I have arrived for the event. My name is on the list." Garrison's response was nothing other than a disdainful smile, laden with preconceptions that were as obvious as they were unbearable. "I'm sorry, miss, but it seems there has been an error," he commented, pausing in a way that resonated in the space between them. "This event is exclusive." At that precise moment, the line continued to advance, while those who were ahead of her passed through the door without inconvenience or questions, as if Garrison's authority was applied selectively. The guard's routine unfolded in a macabre choreography. He checked documents, nodded indifferently at the faces he considered suitable, and, with the same coldness, set aside those who did not meet his tacit criteria. The contrast was overwhelming. While a few received a cordial and expedient treatment, Nia's delicate figure became the epicenter of a silent injustice, marked by exclusion. Her eyes, reflecting an internal struggle, shone with a mix of bewilderment and growing determination. Garrison's gaze remained fixed on Nia, evaluating her with a coldness that bordered on implacability. While the artificial lights of the Hollywood Bowl began to turn on, announcing the start of a night that promised much more than music and spectacle. And so, in that suspended moment, the inescapable collision between ideal and reality made itself present. Nia, with her bearing as a rising star, was facing the obstacle of a guard whose routine and convictions seemed to have intertwined into an almost insurmountable barrier. The expectation vibrated in every corner, and although the murmur of the crowd barely attempted to break the silence, it was known deep down that this encounter was only the prelude to something greater, a promise that justice and truth, no matter how delayed, would find their way into the light of that twilight that now gave way to night. Among the crowd emerged Elena, a journalist with keen eyes and a determined voice, whose phone had become her tool to decipher the truth. With steady steps and an expression that oscillated between compassion and indignation, she made her way toward the epicenter of the conflict. Her phone captured every word and every murmur, and her presence, almost defiant, broke the collective murmur with the promise of exposing what was hidden. "What exactly happened?" asked Elena to one of those present, whose wavering gaze betrayed confusion. It was something I did not expect to see," responded a trembling voice, while the atmosphere filled with comments and whispers that sought to shape the story. Elena's gaze briefly settled on Nia, capturing on her device not only the pain but also the latent strength that shone in her eyes. With the empathy of one who understands the struggle for dignity, she insisted, "I need to know how you felt, so that the world knows that this is not a simple misunderstanding, but the manifestation of a system that oppresses." The firmness of her voice promised that nothing would be forgotten, and that the roots of prejudice would be untangled in the light of truth. Suddenly, an uneasy murmur ran through the crowd, growing until it became an outburst of voices. "Let her speak," someone shouted from the back. Another pushed forward, challenging the space that Garrison had imposed. For the first time, the man's authority seemed to waver. His furrowed brow tightened, as if for an instant he had felt something new, the possibility of losing control. For an instant, Garrison's face hardened even more. In an abrupt movement, he raised his hand, as if he were going to physically stop her. A contained gasp ran through the crowd. Nia did not move. She did not retreat. Her gaze burned with defiance. Garrison pressed his lips together and lowered his hand, recomposing himself in an instant, as if anger had betrayed him. The atmosphere grew increasingly dense. The revelation of prejudice was not only the manifestation of an isolated act, but the echo of an education and of a personal history marked by exclusion. Garrison, in his small universe, was torn between the rigidity of his convictions and a shadow of doubt that began to show in the recesses of his consciousness. Every memory that visited him, of childhood pain and rejection, wove the fabric of his current attitudes, explaining without excusing the implacable judgment he had uttered. The night advanced, and Elena continued interrogating those present, her voice resonating with an urgency that did not admit evasive answers. Every statement, every whisper, was a piece of the puzzle that began to delineate the magnitude of the problem. It was not a mere error on the list, but a structure of prejudices that extended from the roots of the individual to the highest echelons of power. Thus, among revelations and dialogues charged with emotion, the truth emerged forcefully. Garrison felt the shadow of doubt, while Nia turned pain into determination. The murmur of the crowd grew, and the night awaited the outcome of an inevitable change. The air around the Hollywood Bowl transformed into an unstoppable torrent of voices, messages, and heartbeats of solidarity. The news of the incident spread as quickly as a fire in the midst of a drought. In minutes, every mobile device was replicating images and accounts, fueling collective indignation. Among the crowd, passionate voices rose with gestures that betrayed contained anger, congregating just a few steps away from where Nia stood. A man with a fierce gaze raised his voice, "Justice now," igniting the collective fury. His shout merged with others, forming an improvised chorus that reverberated off the walls of the venue, carrying with it the promise of imminent change. Meanwhile, Elena, the journalist who had already distinguished herself in covering the incident, was recording every testimony with urgency, searching for the truth amidst the controversy. Her gaze, sharp and compassionate, fell on Nia, whose dignity rose despite the adversity. With a firm and resonant voice, Elena began broadcasting live. "We are witnessing a crucial moment. This discriminatory act has ignited an unstoppable spark. As the clamor of solidarity continued growing at the entrance, the atmosphere inside the Hollywood Bowl took an unusual turn. Amid the pre-event anticipation, a small group of attendees, with faces illuminated by the flickering light of their mobile devices, realized what was circulating on social media: live images of the incident featuring Nia. Without exchanging many words, they raised their phones in unison, waving them in the air as if choreographed by an invisible force. The gesture, spontaneous and charged with energy, soon became a wave that swept through the audience. Soon, almost everyone present replicated the movement, creating a sea of twinkling lights in the dimness of the amphitheater. In the midst of that improvised spectacle, confused and excited murmurs could be heard. "What does this mean?" they asked one another. Gradually, the conversations intertwined, and the majority understood that this collective act was a declaration of rejection and support for Nia, a silent but powerful protest against the injustice being experienced at the entrance. On the other side of the threshold, confusion mixed with surprise. Nia, still in the process of entering and surrounded by those who shared her uncertainty, was startled upon hearing the thunderous clamor coming from inside the Hollywood Bowl. The sound, similar to the roar of an enraged crowd, imposed itself over the tense external environment, announcing that, despite the coldness of the protocol, something transcendent was happening. At that precise moment, her phone vibrated with a notification. A live video was circulating on social media, capturing every moment of that choreography of solidarity unfolding inside the Hollywood Bowl. Upon seeing the image, a wave of emotion ran through her body from head to toe, and Nia felt that, although the rejection had materialized in an unjust act, the solidarity of the crowd was an unbreakable shield that propelled her to move forward. Her statement, pronounced with the firmness of someone who has decided to no longer accept silence, spread quickly, echoing in every corner of the crowd. Uncertainty mixed with hope, and every voice, every heartbeat, seemed to announce the dawn of an era where justice would refuse to be postponed. The ensemble of dialogues, live testimonies, and spontaneous interventions created a symphony of protest and empathy. Nia was seen enveloped in a network of solidarity that not only denounced the discriminatory act, but also painted in colors the promise of a future where barriers would crumble. In that ephemeral yet crucial moment, the Hollywood Bowl became the epicenter of a call to justice, where every message, every word, and every shout added to the inescapable clamor for change. The tension grew. This incident, brief in its occurrence, but immense in its impact, would not be forgotten. Sitting in a velvet-upholstered armchair, Beyoncé held her phone in one hand while with the other she gently caressed the surface of a table laden with memories and personal documents. In her eyes, shades of melancholy and determination were drawn, reflecting past battles and the unwavering promise to transform pain into action. "Each wound has taught me that my voice is my shield and my sword." Beside her, her assistant Nicole, a discreet and loyal figure, leaned in gently. "Beyoncé, messages are coming in nonstop. People are demanding answers, and the outcry for justice has become undeniable." Beyoncé looked up, her eyes sparkling under the diffuse light. With a pause that seemed to measure the importance of the moment, she replied, her voice laden with a mixture of reminiscence and resolution. "I have always believed that art is the echo of our deepest truths. Today, more than ever, I feel that I must use my voice to heal and challenge what is wrong." Beyoncé furrowed her brow and murmured aloud, "Why didn't Nia use the artist's entrance?" Nicole, her assistant, looked up, noticing the unease in her tone. Perhaps she wanted to challenge the order that no longer serves. Beyoncé nodded slowly. Yes, it was an act of resistance. The answer floated in the air, and Beyoncé nodded slowly, letting the idea settle in her mind like the seed of a new determination. With the transition from afternoon to evening, the atmosphere in the backstage grew even more intimate. The shadows lengthened, and every corner seemed to whisper stories of overcoming. Beyoncé, now imbued with an unwavering resolve, made a decision. Her face, illuminated by the flickering light of an old lamp, turned serious and firm. Suddenly, her phone vibrated insistently. She took the device and saw the sender, Ava DuVernay, an influential director, a powerful voice in the fight for equality. Beyoncé opened the message, with her heart pounding. I can't believe this is still happening. If we don't raise our voice, we are perpetuating the problem. Are you planning to do something? Beyoncé felt a knot in her stomach. It wasn't just an isolated act. It was an echo of every silenced injustice, a reminder of the responsibility that weighed on her. Her silence would be complicity, and that was something she would never allow. This injustice will not go unanswered, she thought to herself. I cannot stand idly by while the echo of rejection becomes the prelude to oppression. A tense murmur came from the hallway. Beyoncé looked up and saw two members of the production team talking in low voices. If this goes public, it will be a scandal. It already is, replied the other, frowning. Beyoncé felt a chill run down her spine. It was not just an injustice. It was a symptom of something deeper, of a system that continued to allow these situations to occur without consequences. With a serene yet authoritative voice, she addressed Nicole. Prepare everything necessary. I want us to organize a live intervention from this moment on. It is time for the world to see that justice is not negotiable and that, when we are called to fight, we respond with our whole being. Nicole nodded with respect, aware of the magnitude of the moment and of the transformation that was about to be unleashed. In the backstage of the Hollywood Bowl, Beyoncé made a decision. She would leave her safe zone to confront the injustice that no one else was stopping. With every step that took her toward the main entrance, the distant murmur of the audience intertwined with her own rapidly beating heart, announcing the imminent eruption of justice. As she advanced down the hallway, a nearby figure, Frank, a trusted collaborator, smoothly interposed himself in her path. With a voice laden with concern, he asked, Beyoncé, why are you leaving the safeguarded area? Here you are safe, and outside we do not know what to expect. She halted her march, looking intently into Frank's eyes, and in a firm whisper, almost imperceptible to the rest, she replied, The truth is not hidden in zones of privilege. Outside, something unacceptable is happening, and no one is doing anything. I cannot stay here. If you like, you can accompany me, but no one will stop me. With that response, determination shone in her gaze, dispelling any trace of hesitation. Slowly, she turned toward the main door, where fate awaited her with a mixture of tension and hope. The atmosphere transformed radically. Upon crossing the threshold, Beyoncé found herself in the epicenter of the conflict. In front of her, Garrison, with a stubborn look, ignored the complaints and the growing clamor of those present, maintaining his position with the same rigidity as always, blocking the entrance for Nia, who watched with an unmistakable aura of pain and growing empowerment. The eyes of the nearest audience turned toward Beyoncé. The rumor grew. No one expected to see Beyoncé so close that night, and the applause erupted. They were not only celebrating the artist, but the act of solidarity that was about to begin. For many, the presence of the legend in flesh and blood was an unexpected gift. The applause and cheers rose spontaneously, filling the atmosphere with an almost palpable energy. With measured but firm steps, Beyoncé advanced toward the guard. Her bearing was the personification of calm and determination, and every movement of hers seemed to resonate in the expectant silence of the place. An authoritative voice rose from the epicenter of the tumult when, in a tone that tried to mix professionalism and contempt, Garrison spoke. "Ma'am, your presence here is not necessary. This is a security matter." The silence stretched. Beyoncé took a deep breath. She knew that every word she would say at that moment would resonate far beyond that place. And then, she raised her chin and spoke with a voice that cut through the air. "True security is based on justice and respect. How can you deny access to someone who is part of the show? Are your prejudices stronger than a person's dignity?" Garrison looked at her with disdain, without ceasing to display his authoritative stance. His words came out dry and full of prejudice. "She does not pass. The procedure is clear, and nothing will change no matter how much you are here." Beyoncé did not take a step back. Her gaze did not falter. People around began to notice the change in the air. The atmosphere grew denser, as if the whole space were waiting for a spark to set the confrontation on fire. Do you know what it means when you decide who deserves to pass just by their appearance? It is not security. It is racism. All around, the crowd gathered, and amid applause and cheers, some of the guard's companions began to withdraw abruptly, as if the weight of the moral evidence had forced them to rethink their loyalty. The guard furrowed his brow, trying not to yield, but something began to move inside him. "Do not waste my time," Garrison said finally, with a touch of nervousness that he could not hide. But Beyoncé did not let herself be intimidated. With a firm step, she moved a little closer, and, without taking her eyes off him, her words became even more intense, even clearer. "This is not your space to impose your prejudices. If you want respect, learn to respect. And if you do not know how, then I am going to teach you here in front of everyone." Nia, who had been watching from the side, felt a mixture of relief and astonishment. Every word of Beyoncé spoke to her deep inside, like an echo that was reflected in her own struggle. Her heart beat faster, feeling that the power of justice was now on her side. Garrison took a step forward, raising a hand in a gesture that was not only intended to be authoritative but defiant. "If you want to enter, you will have to do so above my authority." An unsettling murmur ran through the crowd. Beyoncé maintained her composure, but her eyes sparkled with a determination that made the guard harden. Garrison added, "Rules exist for a reason, and I am the one who enforces them." The media captured every moment, while the atmosphere transformed from contained hostility to an almost electric anticipation, where the struggle became a symbol of imminent change. The cameras captured every word. What began as an act of discrimination was now a public confrontation. And Beyoncé was not going to back down. From inside the Hollywood Bowl, an unexpected contingent appeared. Frank, Nicole, two more of Beyoncé's friends, and a group of 5 guards designated to the security of the artists. Their arrival seemed to set the stage for a larger intervention. However, upon seeing them approach, Beyoncé raised her hand with a determined gesture, as if to say, "Stop, let me handle this." The reinforcements stopped, remaining at a distance, expectant and watching in silence, ready to intervene in case the situation got out of hand. Garrison, the stubborn guard, remained firm in his position, with his hardened gaze and his torso erect, as if he were the last wall of an immovable bastion. Beside him, in the midst of the controlled chaos, a colleague uttered in a muffled whisper full of resignation, "This is getting out of control. I have to leave." With those words, the ally abandoned his post, leaving Garrison alone in the epicenter of the confrontation, further intensifying the feeling of isolation in the midst of the storm. Meanwhile, Beyoncé, aware that her first wave of indignation had ignited an uncontrollable spark, stopped for a moment to recalibrate her strategy. With the serenity of one who has battled ghosts from the past, she raised her voice again, this time with a tone that aimed to appeal to Garrison's conscience and humanity. Her gaze, intense and sincere, locked into the guard's eyes as she began to speak. "Garrison, don't you think that we all deserve to be treated with respect?" She began, her voice resonating with a mixture of sadness and determination. "It's not just a matter of following a procedure. It's about recognizing the dignity of every human being." The guard furrowed his brow, his hardened gaze remaining fixed and unwavering. "I don't need to listen to moral lessons," he replied in a dry tone. "My job is to maintain order, and you're here to interfere with that." Beyoncé felt how her words tried to open a crack in Garrison's armor, but each stubborn response only fueled her own inner anger. Internally, she struggled to maintain self-control, remembering her own battles and the price of every gesture of indignation. She took another step forward and, with a contained sigh, continued, "But what use is that order if it is based on injustice?" She asked, her voice rising slightly. Garrison, with his lips pressed together, responded without yielding, "I only follow orders. My duty is clear, and that is what matters." The tension grew, while the murmur of the crowd turned into an almost deafening echo. Beyoncé, seeing that words were not penetrating Garrison's stubbornness, lowered her voice a bit, seeking a more intimate, more human angle. "Garrison, you have the power to make a difference. Don't let pride blind you to the possibility of being part of the solution." The guard, hardened, let out a snort that could barely be heard above the clamor. "I don't need you telling me what to do. My path is set, and I will not change because of your ideals." And at that moment, while the words floated in the air and the tension reached a critical point, Beyoncé took Nia's hand, and with a defiant look that seemed to challenge fate itself, she exclaimed, "Try to stop me, Garrison." The audience held its breath. Garrison's response did not come in the form of words, but in the subtle yet definitive gesture of his inaction. Beyoncé advanced with Nia with determination, willing to tear down the greatest barrier in her way, and Garrison was forced to step aside to give way to Beyoncé. Immediately, an explosion as loud as a cannon in the midst of silence was heard. The crowd, astonished and excited, reacted immediately, applauding and showing their support for that act of bravery and determination. The tension reached a breaking point. With one final, decisive gesture, Beyoncé and Nia crossed the door together, leaving behind the confrontation zone. Just as they passed to the other side, Beyoncé turned to face Garrison once more, staring him down and, with a defiant voice, said, "This does not end here." The declaration sank into the atmosphere like a promise of the future, a warning that the fight for justice would not be silenced or relegated to oblivion. Barely had Beyoncé and Nia crossed the main door when the tide seemed to turn in favor of justice. At the threshold, while the echo of applause still resonated outside, Frank and Nicole approached with faces illuminated by admiration and relief. The atmosphere, which moments before had vibrated with tension and confrontation, began to transmute into an expectant calm, as if destiny itself were restoring balance to the night. A supervisor from the security company, with a firm step and a confident gaze, stepped forward. His voice, serene yet authoritative, cut through the murmur of the surroundings. "Enjoy the event. I will make sure that this situation is corrected. Garrison will be removed, and the investigation will be concluded before the show comes to an end." The supervisor's words spread like a bomb among the group, and in the moment they were spoken, a slight dissipation of the anger that had marked the previous moments was felt. Beyoncé, still with the adrenaline of the confrontation vibrating in every fiber of her being, along with Nia, Frank, and Nicole, began to make her way into the interior of the venue. As they advanced through the dimly lit corridors, the murmur of voices transformed into praises and whispers of approval. Beyoncé, with a slight gesture, momentarily diverted her attention from the external uproar and turned toward Nia, who still showed in her eyes the spark of an inner struggle turned into strength. "Nia, I want to congratulate you for your determination," Beyoncé said, her voice soft yet firm, almost in an intimate murmur as they walked down the corridor leading to the dressing room. "But tell me, why did you decide not to use the door designated for us artists?" Nia's face lit up with a mixture of shyness and conviction. In a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all her experiences, she replied in a calm yet meaningful voice, "Before reaching the artist's door, I received a message from a friend who, with tears in her eyes, had just left for her home. Garrison had prevented her from entering, and she felt humiliated and rejected. That news hit me hard. I felt that if I did not challenge that barrier, many others would continue to suffer the same. I decided that I had to defy the situation, to demonstrate that dignity is not negotiable and that there is no door that should exclude those of us who have something to offer." Beyoncé nodded slowly, letting Nia's words permeate the atmosphere like a promise of change. However, deep down, the artist felt an unease she could not disguise. The intensity of what she had experienced had left a mark on her soul, and the weight of the night rested on her shoulders with renewed force. With measured steps, Beyoncé diverted her gaze to a corner of the corridor, where the dim light seemed to invite her to pause. With a voice choked by emotion, she confessed to Nia in an almost inaudible tone, "Today I have felt the fury of injustice and the strength of solidarity, but also, I must admit, I feel very uneasy about what we experienced. I need a moment to regain my serenity, to organize my thoughts and find that calm that will allow us to continue fighting with clarity." As Beyoncé and Nia advanced down the corridor, an unknown security guard from Garrison's team watched Nia with a furrowed brow. His rigid posture and icy gaze sent a shiver down her spine. Suddenly, he interrupted their progress with a curt voice. "Do you have authorization to be here?" The air tensed. Nia felt a lump in her throat, fearing that everything would crumble again. Beyoncé turned and, looking directly at him with a razor-sharp calm, replied, "Is there still someone here who hasn't understood what just happened?" An uncomfortable silence took over the corridor. The guard maintained his gaze, but then, after what seemed like endless seconds, he stepped aside with a forced nod. Beyoncé paused for a moment before crossing the door to the dressing room. She looked at Nia and said with a slight smile, "Come accompany me. I want to get to know you better." Together, they disappeared into the intimacy of the dressing room while, outside, the Hollywood Bowl vibrated with the echo of an imminent change. The stage of the Hollywood Bowl transformed into a sanctuary of lights and shadows, prepared for an instant that seemed suspended in time. The gloom dissipated in the face of the brilliance of the spotlights, and, in the midst of that vibrant stage, Nia took her first steps toward the center. The crowd, still electrified by the previous events, held its breath in expectant silence. On the giant screens and on every mobile device, the videos of her brave challenge were replayed on loop, evidencing the courage and determination that had brought her to that moment. As Nia stepped onto the stage, instead of an immediate ovation, an uncomfortable silence spread throughout the venue. The crowd stopped, hesitating whether to applaud or wait. In that moment, Beyoncé exchanged a knowing look with Nia, as if conveying, "Take your time, do it your way." With a deep breath and renewed determination, Nia took another step forward. At that very moment, the silence was broken. The ovation exploded with the force of an unstoppable torrent, filling every corner of the Hollywood Bowl. From the side of the stage, Beyoncé watched with a mixture of admiration and indescribable pride. In the vast universe of show business, it was rare to see someone receive more ovations than herself. However, in that moment, Nia shone with her own light, announcing the birth of a new star. Every step she took was a reflection of the path she had traveled, from pain and rejection to the strength that now drove her to be the voice of those who had been silenced. Within her, the echoes of supportive messages, the memories of dark nights, and the certainty that that moment was only the beginning of something much greater resonated. The atmosphere became imbued with a magic that seemed to predict that the night still held unimaginable surprises. Beyoncé, almost in a barely audible whisper for those at her side, commented with a mixture of emotion and conviction. Today, Nia is not just stepping onto the stage. She becomes the beacon that will light the way to a more just and bold future. The applause intensified, and the ovation for Nia reached such magnitude that, for an instant, the roar of the crowd was the undisputed protagonist of the event. The new star, standing tall at the center of the platform, smiled with gratitude and determination, aware that every glance and every shout of approval propelled her to leave her mark on history. The stellar moment had arrived. Nia, the embodiment of resilience, claimed the center of the stage. With each applause, the beginning of a cultural revolution was announced, a promise that justice and the beauty of art would prevail. While euphoria flooded the stage, in a dark corner, in the gloom of the entrance, the stubborn silhouette of Garrison remained unaltered at the main door, a silent reminder that, although change was beginning to take shape, the fight against prejudice had only just begun. The next morning brought with it an atmosphere different from the charged tension of the previous night, but the revolutionary energy was still palpable in the air. The echoes of the confrontation had transcended the stage and had infiltrated every corner of the city, turning the incident into a catalyst for change. However, amid the first glimmers of dawn, Beyoncé discovered a bitter truth. Garrison, the guard who had embodied prejudice, had not been removed from his post that night. That revelation was a stab that made it clear to her that the problem was much deeper, rooted in the values of the security company to which he belonged. In meetings organized the following day, under the watchful eye of activists and highly influential political figures, Beyoncé appeared before the press and in round tables to expose, with the clarity of conviction and the sharpness of someone who has experienced injustice, the facts that demonstrated the company's responsibility in allowing a man with such evident prejudices to remain in service. With a serene but relentless voice, she stated, "Tonight was not a simple operational error, but a systemic failure. The security company has shown that its policies are distorted by values that cannot coexist with the justice and equity that we demand in our cultural spaces. The reaction was immediate. Amid intense debates and moving testimonies, a new vision of reconciliation and change was forged. Beyoncé, together with Nia, presented a bold proposal: the creation of an NGO, a mediating body that would serve as a bridge between entertainment companies and security companies. This entity would have the mission of monitoring and approving, through transparent criteria and ethical principles, the hiring of security personnel for large events. The idea, full of hope and revolutionary in its simplicity, was received with fervor by the community. In joint statements, Beyoncé and Nia assured, "We will not allow discrimination and prejudice to continue being common currency in our spaces. It is time to establish a standard, a seal of integrity, that guarantees that in our events the dignity of each person is respected." The proposal quickly gained traction. In a matter of hours, the three main entertainment companies in the country spoke in favor, committing themselves to adhere to the new entity and to veto, without exception, any hiring of security personnel that did not meet the new ethical standards. The leaders of these three companies took a step further by proposing the name Instituto de Equidad y Seguridad en Eventos for the new NGO, and requested the participation of Beyoncé and Nia in it, reflecting their commitment to a future where integrity in the organization of events is non-negotiable. This support became a milestone that marked a before and after. The future of cultural events was drawn with the promise of spaces free from discrimination and oppression. Furthermore, an innovative vision of the future was envisioned. Traditionally, event organizing companies were evaluated on a scale from 1 to 5 stars. With the establishment of the Institute, the concept of the 6-star was introduced, an exclusive distinction that would only be awarded to those companies that during the previous year had organized their events with the mediation and certification of the Institute for the selection of their security services. This new seal not only represented a tangible commitment to excellence and equity, but it also transformed the paradigm of the industry, laying the foundations for a scenario where quality and justice become the norm at every major event. Meanwhile, public and media pressure forced the security company to take action. In the shadow of the complaints and the critical eye of the community, the corporation had no choice but to sanction Garrison and subject all its security guards to intensive awareness and values training programs. The response, although late, was a step towards reconciliation and the recognition that change had to start from the grassroots. 2 years have passed since that night which marked the awakening of a collective consciousness. The city, once chained to old prejudices, now beats with a new rhythm, that of justice, integrity, and hope. The first months after the establishment of the Instituto de Equidad y Seguridad en Eventos, ISE, became a revelation for the industry. The three main entertainment companies, which at that pioneering moment had driven the creation of the NGO, transformed into living examples of integrity by adopting the 6-star distinction. This new seal, reserved only for those companies that during the previous year had organized their events with the mediation and certification of the ISE, became the mark of true prestige in the world of entertainment. The companies that managed to obtain the 6th star saw their reputation soar extraordinarily. They attracted an increasingly conscious, sensitive, and committed audience to the cause of equity. The message was clear. True exclusivity was no longer rooted in ostentation, but in social responsibility and transparency. With this paradigm shift, around 92% of the companies in the sector were forced to begin a process of transformation, adapting their protocols and values to align with the new ethical standard imposed by the community and the ISE. In that atmosphere of renewal, the figure of Nia had consolidated itself as a symbol of hope, one that had emerged from adversity. For her part, the intervention of Beyoncé, who that night challenged racism and oppression with words and actions, was enshrined as a milestone in the fight for equality. Her bravery had not only saved Nia's honor, but it also evidenced that true transformation begins when powerful voices ally with those who cry out for justice. The repercussion of the incident expanded beyond the world of entertainment. Over time, the ISC was recognized as a symbol of transparency, justice, and responsibility, transcending the limits of the public sphere. Its influence spread to other areas, sports, politics, and culture, where integrity became an inescapable requirement for any organization. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss more inspiring content. Share this video with friends and family who need to see stories that challenge perspectives and leave an indelible mark. Explore our channel to discover stories that inspire and transform. Until the next video. In every corner, from the first months of its establishment to the consolidation of the 6th star seal, the transformation was palpable. The new policies, the commitment of the companies, and the fervor of an awakened community configured a panorama in which the future was projected free of discrimination, where success was measured not only in figures, but in values.